Okay, and in this recording, you're going to get background information for Roanoke. I can argue what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. You will write an argumentative paragraph of what happened to the lost colony of Roanoke. So I'm going to provide some background knowledge. Then we'll provide a lot of evidence, and you're going to try to decide for yourself what happened to Roanoke. And so we learned already how Christopher Columbus claimed the lands that he discovered for Spain. And this helped Spain establish a huge empire. After Columbus, Spanish conquistadors like Hernando Cortez conquered the Aztecs in modern-day Mexico, and Francisco Pizarro conquered the Incan Empire in Peru. So the Spanish had this huge empire as they conquered these Native American empires. And they would melt down the gold that they had into gold bars, and they would bring it back to Spain. So from their huge empire, Spanish galleons, this is a ship called a galleon, brought home millions of tons of gold and silver. And so there was all this wealth that Spain was getting. And other European countries saw this. And other European countries thought, wow, we want a piece of the action. And one of these countries was in England. And so there was a rich noble. His name was Sir Walter Raleigh. And he was a friend of the Queen of England at this time. It was Queen Elizabeth. And he paid for the first English attempt for a colony. And so they found an ideal location, which he thought was perfect. It's called Roanoke Island. And today it's right off the coast of North Carolina. And he sent about 120 people, including 90 men, 17 women, and 11 children. And he designated a governor over the island. And the governor left the island to go get supplies after they're all on this island. And he said he would be back in about 6 months. But when he got to England, the Spanish were invading England. The Spanish had built the largest navy in history up to that time. It's called the Spanish Armada. And they wanted to take over England. But the Spanish ships were huge and they were slow. And they were closely packed. And so the English had small maneuverable ships that were able to outmaneuver them, shoot them and sail away, and shoot them some more and sail away. And they were also, the English packed old ships with gunpowder and lit it on fire and aimed it right towards the center of these closely packed ships. And so the Spanish ships had to scatter, and then they were hit with storms. And they ran into rocks, a lot of them sank. It was a terrible disaster for a lot of the Spanish Armada. And so this invasion failed, but it delayed the governor's return to Roanoke. And so 3 years later, the governor of Roanoke, his name was John White, he was finally able to return to Roanoke. And this is what he wrote in his journal. We went to where their houses had been, but we found the houses taken down. And we found a palisade or a wall of tree trunks surrounding this place. In one of the trees or posts at the entrance, the words Croatoan was carved. So this is his journal. He didn't find any bodies. He didn't find like the place hadn't been burned down. So it didn't seem like there was a violent end. And he thought they just had decided to leave. And Croatoan was the name of another island where a native tribe lived called the Croatoans. But the ship that John White was on was leaking, and the crew demanded that they sail directly back to England. And John White or anybody else never returned within, the recent decades. And the people that were left were never found. And so they became known as the lost colony of Roanoke. And this is the only clue, Croatoan carved into one of the trees in the palisade in the wall. So what happened to Roanoke? Well, some people say, well, maybe they left, but then later on they were killed by Indians. Or some people say, no, they just joined Indian tribes. They became members of Indian tribes. And others say, well, it's possible the Spanish could have found them. The Spanish are trying to settle, and maybe the Spanish killed them. So those are different explanations. You're going to look at some evidence, and write an argument in a paragraph about what is likely to have happened.